afternoon, fellow constitutional warriors. Welcome to the Free for All Friday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is April 27th, the year of our Lord 2018. Remember, we're a hyphen-free zone, PC-free zone, and God is still in control, and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful Central Susquehanna Valley, in the rainy, wet Central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. I have a good show set up for you today, folks. We're going to be talking about the dangerous path towards social democracy in our country. And the more I look at things, the more I read articles, the more YouTube videos I watch, and I'm very careful about which ones I watch. I really don't like watching the conspiracy ones. The conspiracy ones are just that. I think they're conspiracies. I think our lives are full enough without having to resort to conspiracy theories. I don't have time for them because the reason why I don't have time for a lot of conspiracy theories, folks, is because we have enough to try to find out the truth and try to put out the facts when progressives speak. When progressives, social democrats, whatever, I sort of put them under an umbrella of progressive humanism. And we have enough, or at least I do. I don't know about the rest of you folks. I don't have all the time in the world to go about debunking conspiracy theories, because even though conspiracy theories have a kernel of truth, more times than not, everything else that's built around them is just conspiracy. It's just conjecture. It's happenstance that people want to put together. And it's not even, I wouldn't even say it's coincidence. You know, a lot of people would say, well, these things are just coincidental. Well, I wouldn't even say that they're even coincidental. I believe, especially when it comes to part of conspiracy theory, they throw a lot of things together to make something look like it's not, that it's really not. So, and that's about all I'm going to say about conspiracy theory. I don't want to get hung up on this because I think something more important is happening in our country today. I think the progressive humanist agenda, even though I think it still can be fought against, and I think we can still win the cultural war against progressive humanism, I think it's almost akin to the beachheads in Normandy, where the progressive humanists are the Germans that have the Atlantic Wall, and they set that up so they could try to thwart a sea invasion from the Allied forces in England under General Eisenhower. And I see freedom-loving people. I see liberty-loving people. I see people that just want to live their lives in peace and want to take care of what's theirs and help those that are in need, that are in their community or in their social circles. They don't want all this progressivism forced onto them. They want to live in peace. They want to live in freedom. They want to live in liberty. And I look at the folks like that as to being the allied forces against the progressive humanists in this country and throughout the world. I was just watching yesterday, and I just want to link to this. Link to Sargon debate yesterday. I watched the debate with Sargon Khan, and I didn't catch the other guy's name or couldn't pronounce it. Started with an X. They were supposed to. It was over in England. They're supposed to debate in a hall at some college, but they got denied. And all it was a debate about freedom of speech. And things have gotten so bad over in England that they can't even do that. That they get deplatformed, and people don't like the idea of freedom of speech, especially progressive humanists. They don't like the idea that I can come on here and use this platform, get behind this mic, and put forth ideas that I believe in, and put these ideas out in the marketplace of ideas to have them debated. And over in England, they're having a real problem with this, especially freedom of speech. They do not have a constitution in England that protects the citizens' freedom of speech. And I think Mr. Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, did a very good job of laying forth the argument that freedom of speech is a natural right, which it is, along with a lot of other rights that we actually have, especially the rights that are covered in, and it's not an exclusive list or an exhaustive list in the Bill of Rights, but our basic freedoms and rights that are listed in the Bill of Rights that each and every individual had before government was formed. And that's what Benjamin was trying to put forth, that idea. And here in America, we see it all the time. I'm glad that Charlie Kirk and Dave Rubin and Candace Owen was out of Berkeley, of all places, and actually had a nice audience, a huge, diverse audience. And I hate to use the word diverse, but it was. And they were at Berkeley, and I watched that, and I'll link to all these debates. Kirk, Rubin, and Camden Owen. I'm going to link to those in the show notes page, and you'll find these over at the DanClementShow.com. That's where I put my show notes page at. I don't have a lot of room, and we don't have a whole lot of room on the show notes below, or the notes below on the video. So I just put links down there, and the first link is the DanClementShow.com. And I put show notes up there, and I also put this show up in podcast form, because some people like to hear it in podcast. They're not able to be here during the live broadcast at 12 noon. And so I watched both these yesterday. I was prepping for some videos I'm going to shoot later on today, and getting ready for this show today. And it breaks my heart that the folks over in England and Scotland and Ireland are going through this. Count Dacula was facing prison time. He finally got an 800-pound fine, which is about $1,200 here in the United States, or $1,100. And he's repealing the verdict, and I think he's got a good case, because over in America, this case would have never hit the courts. In Canada, it would have definitely went into the courts, because Canada and England are similar in a whole host of ways, and one of them is which they do not have protected freedom of speech up in Canada or in England, and a lot of other countries don't have that either, and that's a shame. But in the United States, if we allow the progressive humanist agenda to take root, and I mean, it's already taking root, but we can stop it. We can stop the progression of progressive socialism, or progressive humanistic social democracy, whatever label you want to put on it. I'm not adverse to labels, folks. I really am not. And so, I got taken to task the other day because, I was talking about identity politics. And of course, this liberal came on, well, what do you think you're doing, because you're calling them progressive liberals? And I'm like, well, then you don't understand the definition of identity politics. And I'm sorry, that you feel that way about it. We all have to be identified one way or the other. I choose to be identified as American, as a Christian, as a constitutional conservative. That's how I want to be identified. I don't want to be identified by the color of my skin, the color of my facial hair, how big my mustache is on my face. My buddy Dave says he prefers to go out to the kitchen when he needs a snack. I prefer to have a snack waiting for me right here at any time. But when you're talking about identity politics, and this is a progressive trap, they want to identify you by attributes that you have no control over. Your hair color, your skin color, your ethnic group you're with, your race, things like that. They want to divide people along those type of identity lines. And I'm just not going to play the game. But as far as labeling to identify somebody, there's nothing wrong with that. That has nothing to do with identity politics. And so in England, I'm watching England, because you know what? If we keep going the same way England goes, we're going to be in a world of hurt here in the United States. England and Canada, they have hate speech laws. And some of these folks on Twitter that I get engaged with, they absolutely will not give me a definition, their definition of what hate speech is, which there isn't. Is there speech that is hateful? Yes. Is that hateful speech? Should it be denied people? Should they be denied the right to speak their mind and what they believe in? No. Because that's where the marketplace of ideas comes in. They get to air that in the marketplace of ideas, and it gets to be debated. And it gets to stand or fall on their argument, or whatever it is, and whether it's a racist argument, whether it's an argument against the LGBTQ community, an argument against conservatives, whatever their argument, whatever their stand, whatever their platform is. The best place to have it is in the marketplace of ideas where it can be debated, where we can have some civil public discourse on it. We're slowly losing that in America today. We have the big three, or actually you should say the big four. You have Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and then Google as a search engine that are really left-leaning. It has been documented so many times how they curtail conservative speech, how Google curtails certain search terms because they're trying to drive an agenda. I can't tell you the last time I used Google as my search engine. I used DuckDuckGo. And I've had shows about this, talking about these different things like DuckDuckGo, Brave Browser. I use Gab AI. I use Minds.com. I use WeMe as replacements for the big social medias. I use BitChute. I use Patreon to put my videos out on. I have a lot of other platforms so that if something happens with the big four, and Google is a search engine, but they own YouTube. But the big three, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, if they continue down their paths, they will go bankrupt. Because you can't take out half or more of your base and on your social media. You can't deny people their right to put out their ideas to their communities, which they built, which Facebook, Google, and Twitter profit off of, their communities. You can't deny them access to their communities that they build up and you profit off of and not face any consequences. This dangerous path towards social democracy that we're on is being aided by folks like Hillary Clinton and the corruption that surrounds her, her husband, and everything she's ever touched. We were talking yesterday on Twitter, and they were going, these progressives are really either, I don't think they're ignorant, and I don't think they're misinformed. I think what they're doing is a tactic that if they just deny, and make you prove everything, even though it's been proven time and time again, and even though they know the truth, they will not speak it. And we're talking about the Russian collusion investigation by Robert Mueller, and how he's found more evidence of collusion and corruption with Democrats than he did with Donald Trump. And yet I don't see any indictments coming down from that. I don't see any referrals to the U.S. attorney for criminal prosecution with that. And I laid it out, and all I got back was, all that's been debunked. I said, by who? And they come out with these fact checker sites. I just laughed and left them alone. These people are so wedded to their narrative in their echo chamber that it's going to be nigh impossible to get some of these folks out of their echo chambers and get them away from that narrative. I try, and I won't stop trying. I'll put forth the truth. If they don't like it, tough. And the only way that they try to, and this is a tactic too, what they do, especially on Twitter, is I'll be debating, or I like to say arguing, with 3 or 4 liberals at a time. It won't be just one-on-one. I got to answer, or this is the way they think I have to do. I don't do it. They think I have to answer all 3 or 4 of them. And I'll just deal with the main one I was dealing with to begin with, and I won't let them dogpile on me with all their other questions, accusations, and I'm like, well, you guys need to go research that. A lot of times when I say, you guys need to go research that more. I'm not here to be your research buddy. I'm not here to explain to you 100,000 times a truth that has been proven true. Hillary Clinton is corrupt. There's no doubt in my mind that she's corrupt. I have some articles today we're going to go over in the show. Today we're going to talk about the FCC records indicate Hillary campaign illegally laundered $84 million. This is over at thefederalist.com. $84 million. And I know that the Clinton Foundation investigation is still going on. I've been checking up on that. They're being real hush-hush about what's going on inside, and I kind of worry about that because it is the FBI. And we found, more than enough proof with McCabe and Comey and Stoltz and Page that there's corruption in the FBI, that there is a political leaning in the FBI, which there shouldn't be. I'm bringing up a report today that and I searched these things to see how many hits that they have on DuckDuckGo. And they're very low on the hits for the mainstream media. Now, on the alternate media, the new Main Street media, there are a lot of hits. CDC, in survey it never bothered making public, provides more evidence that plenty of Americans innocently defend themselves with guns. Now, after the Parkland shooting, you heard this cry about, well, Trump needs to direct the CDC to do a study. Well, guess what? They already did it. And I believe, as most bureaucracies in the federal government, the CDC's got political leanings also. And they didn't bother to report this. Somebody had a Freedom of Information Act, and I'm going to read through this with you to get these out. And it's astonishing. It's astonishing how many crimes are thwarted because of concealed carry, because citizens are armed. The pro-gun people, Emily Gonzalez, David Hogg, they don't want, or pro-gun control people, I should say, they don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear this at all. And I brought up an article that was put out at the beginning of the year by Peter Stone about FBI investigating whether Russia funneled cash to the NRA to aid Trump's campaign. And we all know that was found false, that there was no proof that Russia was doing this. Now we have proof that Russia was using Facebook and Twitter and YouTube to push a narrative. There's Russian collusion there. But it seems like wherever the Mueller investigation looks, especially with Donald Trump and on the Republican side, they're not finding much. And all roads are leading back to the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, especially Hillary Clinton. And all the, uranium one, that actually came out in the Mueller investigation. And I pointed out yesterday, and all I got back, well, that was debunked. It wasn't debunked. Hillary Clinton was intimately involved in the uranium one. And we're going to talk a little bit about capitalism, why intellectuals oppose capitalism, and then we're going to end the show up today about the California gender bill. We're going to read through that. The nutballs out in California are coming out in droves. Coming out in droves, folks. They really are. And it just amazes me how that state is even functioning anymore. How it's even functioning anymore. And I tell you what, the Republicans out in California need to get the election process unjury-rigged. And I'll end my monologue on this because a lot of people don't know this. There is a movement out there, and I know some conservatives are caught up in this movement too, about not having primaries, but having the candidates that want to run for an office run for the office, and the top two vote getters go on the ballot and oppose each other, on the ballot, and they oppose each other in the general election. And out in California, more times than not, that means there's two Democrats at the top of the ticket. And there's a lot of people that praise this system. Oh, that's the best system. Well, how do you get representation for all the people with that? especially when you have a corrupt government like the California government, state government, and how it's actually through laws and regulations actually has the Republicans pretty well tied up where they can't win any offices, not in big numbers anymore because of the way the elections are set up out there. Let America Vote talks about how all these jury rigging and how these other state laws, like in New Hampshire, the Republicans in New Hampshire, they want the college students to be residents in New Hampshire before they can vote in the election. And that's a bill they have put forth. And I got in an argument with a lawyer yesterday about this. I said, you obviously haven't read the bill. I have several. And I even quoted a couple Bible scholars. But for an average person to pick up the Bible and read through it, it amazes me. It amazes me how many people complicate the Bible so much, and that's what I was talking to him about. That so many people. They said unable to connect to chat. What's going on here? Hang on a second, folks. I hate doing it. See if that got up there. But we make things harder than what they are. The U.S. Constitution. Do they have some words in there we don't use today? Absolutely. Do we have access to a dictionary that was written around that time? Absolutely. Just go online to the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, and you'll see how the words were defined and used around the founding of our country. If you get stuck on a word or a phrase, it's very simple, but people want to make it harder than what it is. People want to say, well, you're not a constitutional scholar, you're not a constitutional warrior, so we shouldn't listen to you because you don't know what you're talking about. Well, I'm sorry. I look at the Constitution and I let it define itself. It's not hard, but people make it harder than what it is. People make it harder than what it is. And it's the same way in politics, folks. We're so caught up on party politics. And I'm with Chris Ann Hall, principle before party. I'll never be part of a political party that isn't principled and doesn't hold the same principles I do. And the Republican Party no longer holds the same principles I do of freedom and liberty, of smaller government, of just getting back to the freedom and liberty. They don't. And the Democrat Party, I don't know when you can peg that to. It's been probably the late 1800s. They left any pretense of following the Constitution way back then. And even today, when you try to discuss the Constitution with progressive humanists and social democrats, that's an ancient over 200-year-old document. It's not relevant for today. And again, they're talking out their ear, because I think the Constitution, the way it was written, I think our founding fathers got it right. Was it a perfect document? No. That's why they left an amendment process in it. We have 27 amendments. We tried to fix things, and we can still continue to fix things. But it's the best document we have going for limited government. And this is why the progressive humanists and the social democrats, this is why they don't like it. Because their God is government. And anything that restricts the power of their God should be attacked, avoided, should be made null and void. It's just that simple, folks. I think, again, in politics, we make things harder than what it is. I have cousins that are so in love with Hillary Clinton and so in love with Barack Obama that if you bring out anything, especially like the article I'm going to bring out to you now, talking about the FCC, records indicate Hillary campaign illegally laundered $84 million. If you bring this up to them, or if you tell them that the person that was really behind the spying on President Trump's campaign was Barack Obama, they go ballistic. They go apoplectic. They go spastic. They don't want to hear it. Oh, Obama's their man. He couldn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry, he did. Don't tell me that a control freak like Obama didn't know what was going on underneath him in his administration. And if he claims he didn't, then he was the most incompetent president we've ever had, or he's the type of guy that's going to turn a blind eye to anything as long as it advances what he believes to be his agenda, or the agenda of the Social Democrats or progressive humanists. This is by Margaret Cleveland over at the Federalist. The press continues to feed the dying Russian collusion conspiracy theory, spending Friday's news cycle regurgitating Democrat talking points from the just filed Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act lawsuit against Trump campaign, WikiLeaks, and Russia. Now this, folks, this is what the Democrats are doing. They're actually suing the Trump campaign for corruption, for racketeering influence, and there's nothing there. You think, and I keep saying this, do you think if there was anything that Mueller could prove with Donald Trump when it comes to Russian collusion, don't you think that would have been leaked already? Don't you think that would have been all over the headlines for the mainstream media? I do. I believe it would have been. But this is where we've come. This is how far they've come. The Democrats have nothing to offer the American people in the way of policy or anything. This is all they have. If they can knock Trump down, if they can get Trump out of there, then they think they've won a victory. But they haven't. They really haven't. And I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're going to get Trump out of office. And I think the Mueller investigation is going to be over sooner rather than later. I think eventually, now Congress is trying to pass a bill to protect the Mueller investigation, but I don't think it's going to pass. And a matter of fact, if I'm reading the Republicans right in the House of Representatives, I think they might pass a bill to shut down the Mueller investigation that's gone too far out of its original scope of investigation, and any criminal activity that they may have found that the Democrats haven't filed on. It's just again, the Mueller investigation to me is just a joke. It's a sideshow to divert everybody's attention away because the Democrats have nothing. I read on, yet the mainstream media took no notice of last week's federal court filing to expose an $84 million money laundering conspiracy the Democrat National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign executed during the 2016 presidential election in violation of federal campaign finance law. That lawsuit filed last week in D.C. District Court summarizes the DNC Clinton conspiracy and provides detailed evidence from federal election communication filings, confirming the complainant's allegations that Democrats undertook an extensive scheme to violate federal campaign laws. Say it isn't so. The Democrats would violate laws? Oh, perish the thought. There's no corruption in the Democrats or Hillary Clinton. That's what I'm always told. From bundling to laundering, Dan Baker, a campaign finance lawyer and attorney of record in the lawsuit, explained that underlying law in an article for Investors Business Daily, under federal law, an individual donor can contribute $2,700 to any candidate, $10,000 to any state party committee, and during the 2016 election cycle, $33,400 to a national party's main account. These groups can all get together and take a single check from a donor for the sum of those contribution limits. It's legal because the donor cannot exceed the base limit for any one receipt. The state parties can make unlimited transfers to their national party. The legal loophole allows bundlers to raise large sums of money from wealthy donors, more than $400,000 at a time, filtering the funds to the national committees. Democrats and Republicans alike exploit this tactic, but once the money reaches the national committees, other limits apply. Suspecting the DNC had exceeded those limits, a client of Baker's, the Committee to Defend the President, began reviewing FEC filings to determine whether there was excessive coordination between the DNC and Clinton. What Baker discovered, as he explained in an interview, was much worse. There was extensive evidence in the Democrats' own FEC reports, when coupled with their own public statements, that demonstrated massive strawman contributions papered through the state parties to the DNC and then directly to Clinton's campaign, in clear violation of federal campaign finance laws. And on behalf of the clients, on December 15, 2017, Baker filed an 86-page complaint with the FEC asking the FEC to commence enforcement proceedings against Hillary Clinton, her campaign, and its treasurer, the DNC and its treasurer, and the participating state Democrat committees. The complaint and an attached exhibit consisting of nearly 20 pages of Excel spreadsheets detailed the misconduct and provided concrete evidence supporting the allegations. In short, here's what happens and what the evidence establishes. And I'm not going to read this whole article to you folks, but he goes on to talk about, think of it like a shell game with millions of dollars. You know, we're talking about individual candidates. You're talking about the state parties, and then you're talking about the national parties. And what was happening was a lot of this money was being funneled through the state parties and then up to the federal, because remember, the state parties can give unlimited amounts to the national party. Okay? So there was a lot of these contributions that were just the way they were run through. Even though somebody gave $400,000, if they went through and broke those down as individual, let's say, state party contributions, and what did he say? It was like 10,000. Yeah, 10,000 to any state party, you know, in a given year. So let's say that 400,000 was broken down into 40 different people that were straw men. They didn't actually exist. On the books, everything looks good. They're funneling it through the state DNC committees and everything, and parties, and then they're funneling it up to the national committee. That's money laundering, folks. That's money laundering. And I looked this up, and this is barely being reported by the mainstream media. Folks like the Federalist, the New American Media, they're the only ones reporting this. They're the only ones looking into this. And on top of everything else that Hillary Clinton's been involved in. And the worst one in my mind is Benghazi. I'm a veteran and former military. And to leave those folks in Benghazi, Stevens, Ambassador Stevens and the other three that was with him, and not allow our military to go in and rescue them, she has never answered for that. President Obama has never answered for that. As far as I'm concerned, that was criminal negligence on their part, that they allowed American citizens to die in that way. And that's just one of many corrupting things that Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, their foundation has done, the Obama administration. In my opinion, I think the Obama administration has been one of the most corrupt administrations we've ever had in America. And it just amazes me how many people are giving him a pass on that, giving Hillary Clinton a pass on that. It amazes me. It really does. So I'm gonna try to keep up the story for you folks, and I know that my listeners do, because I do, you know, the ones I do hear back from, they give me other articles that I can actually go and read and research and stuff like that. So I know people are actually doing their jobs, you know, as far as helping me with my show here. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit here, but this still goes along with the secular humanist, progressive humanist, the social democrats. We should find just one overarching name for them, and I think I'm just going to start calling them social democrats, and that's going to be my umbrella term for these, because all of them are working towards the same thing. They want a democracy. They don't want a republic. Matter of fact, there's a lot of Republicans I think would rather have a democracy than a republic. And that's dangerous. That's very, very dangerous. And so I think I'm going to start calling them just the social democrats. This is out of the Washington Examiner by Nathan Bryant. This was posted on April 24th. Statistics, they're always missing from gun debates. It's different this time. With every high-profile mass shooting, a new wave of gun control activism inevitably arises. And according to the media, this latest round is always different. This particular shooting was just so exceptional, outrageous, and poignant. Finally, citizens and lawmakers will rise up and start passing serious gun control legislations. People will finally see the NRA for what it is. The media was especially ecstatic about the Parkland, Florida students. All the right factors seem to be in place for actual change. The students were young enough to have emotional leverage, yet old enough to fight. Without a doubt, they are determined. Just recently, yet another school walkout took place. And in the wake of this past weekend's Waffle House shooting, Parkland student Emma Gonzalez is going to even further than before, demanding that all semi-automatic guns be banned and confiscated. I'm going to stop the reading there. I'm finishing up a video about the Waffle House shooting and Emma Gonzalez this afternoon. It'll be posted later on this afternoon. And the tweets that she put out about this was just horrendous. In my opinion, they're just horrendous. And why these people are using these shootings for their political fodder is just, it's gross. It's sickening to me. I read on. In the past, however, the end result has inevitably been the same. Nothing happens. But is Parkland truly different? Has a time finally arrived? To be sure, the Parkland students have pressured legislators to an extent never seen in recent years. Some states, such as Florida, Vermont, and Oregon, have already passed new gun control measures, as have local governments. In addition, corporations have taken matters in their own hands. Dick's Sporting Goods, their bottom line is really hurt by that, has pulled semi-automatic rifles, and Walmart has imposed new restrictions on gun purchases. Bank of America and Citicorp are also refusing credit to any gun manufacturers that make rifles. And I'm going to stop reading there. All of those are financial, have something to do with the financial part of this pro-gun control debate. But Dick's Sporting Goods, they're not even selling the rifles that they have. They're destroying them. And in me personally, I do shop there every now and then. I don't shop a lot there at Dick's Sporting Goods. But you know what? I've always shopped there because of the quality of the stuff. But, you know, I can get just as good as stuff elsewhere. And so I'm taking my dollars because Dick's Sporting Goods is... I hate it when corporations act political. They should stay out of politics. They really should stay out of politics. They should fight to keep the government out of their business, and they should stay out of politics. Walmart, again, they imposed restrictions. I didn't go and look to see what the restrictions were. But American Citigroup, they're refusing credit to the gun manufacturers. Well, guess what? Other banks have already stepped in. And that's a huge boon for these other banks. And Citicorp and Bank of America are going to take a hit on their bottom line. Sorry. They just want to play top politics with your business, you go ahead, but you're going to pay the price. But for all the campaigning, marches, and walkouts, one thing is noticeably absent from the public discourse: statistics. Regardless of how much law changes, the facts do not. And the facts are simply unequivocal. Gun control does not work. Two cities in particular, the District of Columbia and Chicago, starkly illustrate the truth. In 1976, Washington implemented the Firearms Control Regulation Act, an extremely strict ordinance that banned private ownership of handguns and high-capacity semi-automatic weapons. Furthermore, the very few guns that were allowed had to be registered. In 1982, Chicago also banned handguns. Essentially, these two cities had done what liberals dream of doing today. These laws were struck down in two landmark Supreme Court cases: District of Columbia v. Heller in 2008 and McDonald v. City of Chicago in 2010, established the individual right to gun ownership on the federal and local levels, respectively. Today, these cities are ridden with murders and gun crime. Chicago often gets special attention, and whenever the subject comes up, liberals link this problem to the striking down the gun control laws. But is there any truth to this? Did those laws actually work when they were in effect? What happened after they were invalidated? The same year that Chicago first implemented its ban, there were 670 homicides. And the next year, 729 homicides occurred. Eventually, the ban did not have any immediate impact, but maybe it just needed time, right? Actually, murders skyrocketed only a few years later after the handgun ban took effect. In 1991, homicides clocked in at 928, and two of the next 3 years also saw more than 900 murders. Between 1983 and 2010, homicides averaged almost 700 per year. That is no improvement relative to 1982's number. A nearly identical pattern played out in the District of Columbia. In 1976, there were 188 murders. The next year, with the ban in effect, 192 people were killed. And each year between 1989 and 1993, over 400 homicides occurred. The average rate between 1997 and 2008 was about 270. In this case, the situation noticeably worsened when the ban was in place. The year after their respective ordinances were voided, murders slightly decreased in Washington and stayed the same in Chicago. These examples cast serious doubt on gun control as the answer. Gun control only prevents law-abiding citizens from defending themselves. To hinge one's hopes on gun control is to expect that criminals will actually obey the law. Since when has that ever happened? Now, Nathan Bryan is a political writer based in Texas. These are the stats that Emma Gonzalez, David Hogg, and the pro-gun control folks never talk about. Never. Because it goes against their narrative. Murders go up when gun control goes into effect, and murders either steady. In these two instances, they leveled off. They didn't get worse. It takes a number of years for the citizens to rearm themselves after they're disarmed. And here's another thing that I found really strange, and you're still not seeing all this in the lamestream media. This is a Reason.com article by Brian Doherty, put out April 20th. CDC and surveys it never bothered making public provides more evidence that plenty of Americans innocently defend themselves with guns. CDC surveys in the 1990s never publicly reported indicate nearly 2.5 million defensive use of guns a year. That matches the results of Gary Kleck's controversial surveys, and it indicates more defensive than offensive use of guns. Huh. Now, this is a long article. I'm not going to get into a lot of it here because Mr. Kleck has to go through. There was something wrong with some of the figures he was, and it wasn't malicious wrong. It was just something he got wrong. He didn't have all the information. He's going to have to go back through and redo some of the stats that he was bringing out. But I remember distinctly especially after Parkland, we have to have the CDC do a survey or do studies on this. Well, it turns out the CDC did do studies on this. They just weren't being reported. And somebody dug this up over at Reason.com. They found this and they published this out. I just want to read that again. The CDC surveys in the 1990s never publicly reported, indicate nearly 2.5 million defensive uses of guns per year. So that indicates there's more defensive than offensive use of guns. Criminals, and this is something you can go back and research for yourself. This was a few years ago. The Detroit police chief was surveying criminals. And the one thing he found out in these surveys when he was talking to them, that the criminals were more afraid of armed citizens that they didn't know about than they were about police. Because police have a response time. Armed citizens don't. If a robbery is going down in a convenience store and there's more than a couple of people in there and it's a concealed carry state, chances are one of those extra people in that convenience store might be armed. But you don't know who because it's concealed carry. And robbers think about this. Matter of fact, there's a family. I was on Facebook. I didn't even really look this up, but I can believe it in our litigious society today that a family is suing a family of a robber who was shot and killed during an armed robbery by a concealed carry citizen, private citizen, is suing that family because they feel, and this is what they were saying in their statements, they feel that their son should be safe, or anybody should be safe when they go and rob a place. Shouldn't have to worry about someone with concealed carry. And I thought at first this was an Onion article. I did look up a couple sources on it, and it's actually in some of the media, the regular media out there. And I'm like, well, it figures. It figures that a family's going to do this, and it amazes me what family's going to sue for. But I just honestly, and I hate to say this, but I just think this shows the ignorance of the family. Now, they lost a loved one. I'm not taking anything away from that. But their loved one was shot in the commission of an armed robbery, where if he wasn't taken out, he might have killed somebody else. Now, was that fair to the other family that he was robbing the place and killed that person and took that person away from his or her family when they were doing nothing wrong? No, our society's turned upside down, folks. It really is. Where criminals' families are suing people that stop their sons or their daughters in the commission of a crime. You know, hopefully the case gets thrown out. I might go back and try to look that up, but it's silly. And I've heard people talk about more than one of these cases. All right, so we're talking about corruption in politics with the Hillary and the Social Democrats. And I look at the pro-gun control. This goes under the umbrella of the Social Democrats. I look at this as more corruption on their part, because what they're trying to do is take away a natural right that we all have as human beings. And we've had these natural rights before governments were ever formed. And people don't think about it this way. And I know I get taken to task on this on quite a few social media postings. But people have always come before governments. People create the governments. They give consent to being governed over. The people here in the United States were colonists to begin with. They threw the English out, created the states, and then the states got together after they were living under the Articles of Confederation and they weren't working. And if they couldn't fix them, they were told to scrap them. So they scrapped them, created the Constitution we have today, which the states came together and created a federal government. So who has sovereignty over who in the pecking order, as it were, here in the United States? Well, it's the sovereign citizens as a whole are over the state governments, the local and state governments, and then the states are over the federal government because the states created a federal government. But what's happened between the founding of our country and today is citizens of the United States have allowed their politicians to get away with literally everything and haven't held them to their feet to the constitutional fire of limited government. And we're seeing a movement today that's trying to push back against that. It's trying to hold our congressmen, our representatives, our senators, and our elected officials, trying to hold them, especially the federal government, to the Constitution. That's why we don't agree with a lot of the bureaucracies that are going on. Now, again, you'll get pushback from the Social Democrats because, remember, their God is government, and anything to defang or depower or dethrone government is harming their God. So it can't be done. It can't be done. So just remember that. And it just amazes me how these people get away with it. I don't think they're getting away with it anymore because I think more and more people are taking the red pill, as it were. I think I've always been woke. I've always been on the conservative side of things. I really have. I've always been more of an individualist. Every time I've ever followed the crowd, I got in trouble. So I need to stop doing that. But I want to bring out, this goes back to our corruption with Hillary and the corruption with the pro-gun control folks out there. And this goes back to the beginning of the year. This was actually posted January 23rd of this year. FBI investigating whether Russia funneled cash to NRA to aid Trump campaign. It's by Peter Stone and Greg Gordon. Okay? And as far as anybody knows, or I've been able to find out, there was nothing. It was a nothing burger in this investigation. Now, the article reads here, again, this is by Peter Stone and Greg Gordon. The FBI is investigating whether top Russian banker with ties to the Kremlin illegally funneled money to the National Rifle Association to help Donald Trump win the presidency. Two sources familiar with the matter told McClatchy. And this is, again, a McClatchydc.com article. FBI counterintelligence investigators have focused on the activities of Alexander Torshin, the deputy governor of Russia's central bank, who is known for his close relationships with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and the NRA. The sources say it's illegal to use foreign money to influence federal elections. It's unclear how long the Torshin inquiry has been going on, but the new news comes as Justice Department Special Counsel Robert Mueller's sweeping investigation of Russian meddling in the 2016 election, including whether the Kremlin colluded with Trump's campaign, has been heating up. All the sources spoke on condition of anonymity because Mueller's investigation is confidential and mostly involves classified information. And again, whenever I see an article, and I like McClatchy, where it says everybody spoke on condition of anonymity, I really question the veracity and the validity of that article. I really do. I mean, that's personal. That's me personally. A spokesman for Mueller's office declined to comment. The closure of the torsion investigation signals a new dimension in the 18-month-old FBI probe on Russian interference. McClatchy reported a year ago that a multi-agency U.S. law enforcement and counterintelligence investigation into Russia's intervention began even before the start of the 2016 general campaign. Initially included a focus on whether Kremlin secretly helped fund efforts to boost Trump, but little has been said about that possibility in recent months. The extent to which the FBI has evidence of money flowing from torsion the NRA's participation in the transfer of funds could not be learned. And folks, I'm going to say this again. The NRA, as far as I can find out, do not give money directly to candidates. Do they endorse them? Yes. Do they grade them? Yes. Do they have ads supporting the ideologies of senators, representatives? Absolutely. They have a political action committee. But all that activity goes into either opposition research or opposition videos, either posted on YouTube or campaigns and magazines, stuff like that. When Emma Gonzalez said in that speech right after the Parkland shooting that the NRA has blood on her hands, and said that all these politicians get this much money, when I went back and researched at OpenSecrets.org, they didn't directly get any money from the NRA. Now, were there ads posted by the NRA against their oppositions, their opponents? Yes. That's what they were claiming was being given to the candidates. But that's disingenuous. There are PACs all over this country that advertise either for or against somebody or for or against something. And that's not giving money directly to the campaign, as the pro-gun people or pro-gun control folks want people to believe. They want to have you believe that the NRA is guilty of this. And it's not. Now, this is where they get this number, where Emma Gonzalez, David Hogg, and the pro-gun control fanatics get this number. However, the NRA reported spending a record $55 million on the 2016 elections, including $30 million to support Trump, triple what the group devoted to backing Republican Mitt Romney in 2012 presidential race. Most of that money was spent by an arm of the NRA that is not required to disclose donors. But the Trump campaign and all these political campaigns have to report the donations through FEC filings. And there's no way that the NRA gave $30 million to support Trump. That's illegal. Illegal in the extreme. And what the NRA does is advocate through magazine, newspaper ads, and video commercials, YouTube videos discussing these, all that kind of stuff. And it's just, again, this is one of these things, this Mueller investigation has so many fingers going out there because it couldn't find anything directly on Trump. So they said, well, it's there. It's just like narratives. It's just like echo chambers. They have a goal in mind. The goal is, and the ideology is, Trump colluded with the Russians to win the election. And they're not backing off of that at all. No matter how much evidence is lacking, they're not backing off. No matter how much evidence points in the other direction, they're not backing off that narrative. And so if they're not backing off this narrative, they've got to justify their time, so they've got to keep investigating. So they're broadening their investigation and actually going about it where you can actually look up and see what the facts are. See what the facts are in the situation. It's ridiculous, folks. Again, I don't want the independence of the Department of Justice to be compromised. But there's a point. If you have a guy like Rod Rosenstein, whose wife, and I forgot her name, I was looking at it yesterday, whose wife was actually a lawyer for Bill Clinton, or on at least the legal team for Bill Clinton, had some ties to Hillary Clinton. Well, Rod Rosenstein has not been, honestly, he's not been looking at the Mueller investigation to say, look, you've investigated Trump, nothing came of Trump, shut down the investigation. He can shut it down. And I think there's going to come a point where he doesn't do it. But I think the Senate, the House and Senate should. Honestly, I think they should step in and say, look, you haven't found anything. You're wasting all this over $50 million. For what? For what? They're the ones that have the purse strings. They can shut this investigation down. Just defund it. We're not giving you any more money to investigate. You're done. You haven't shown anything. You're done. Will it be a political firestorm if they do it? Absolutely. Should they do it? Absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind they should absolutely do this, but will they? That's the big thing. Now we're going to switch gears here a little bit. I don't want to break anybody's minds by switching too quick. But we're coming down to just a little over an hour in the show now. I have a FEE.org, Foundation for Economic Education. Why do so many intellectuals oppose capitalism? I'm starting to bring it back to a lighter side here. Why do they oppose capitalism? Why do social democrats oppose capitalism? Because capitalism, in its truest sense of the word, is freedom and liberty. It is freedom and liberty, and social democrats do not like that. They do not like freedom and liberty. They do not like individuals being able to be the captains of their own lives. They don't like that because, remember, government's God, and they want to control everything through government. This is by Alberto Mingardi. Following a valuable advice of a co-blogger, David Henderson, I've gotten my hands on Milton Friedman on Freedom, a new collection edited by the Hoover Institute. Now, this was actually put out back in August 15, 2017. It's got a little bit of age, not much, and it's still relevant. And you can actually go on YouTube and watch the Milton Friedman on Freedom. He has a bunch of videos about this. He goes around the world and talks about this economic freedom. A new collection edited by the Hoover Institution. The book will surprise all of us who never properly appreciated the insights and wisdom of Friedman's political thinking. His own particular blend of classical liberalism comes out all the more as subtle and relevant. Among the several chapters, I particularly enjoyed a 1974 interview with Reason magazine. Friedman was then interviewed by the editorial trio Tibor Machin, Joe Cobb, and Ralph Ratio, who were challenging him from what they considered a more consistent libertarian position. The interview is rich and interesting in many ways. Friedman defends a negative income tax and school vouchers as devices for enabling the free market to play a larger role. He admits that the work of E.G. West made him revisit his own rationale for compulsory education, but not to abandon vouchers as a particular policy proposal, and he discusses inflation and the gold standard. Friedman also speaks on a matter which was likewise been pondered by many of his contemporaries, why intellectuals oppose capitalism. These three questions, or to these questions, some have replied that the main reason is resentment. Intellectuals expect more recognition from the market society than they actually get. Some have pointed out that self-interest drives the phenomenon. Intellectuals preach government control and regulation because they'll be the controllers and regulators. Some have taken the charitable view that intellectuals do not understand what the market really is about, as they cherish projects and the market is instead an unplanned order. Friedman rejects the resentment view and proposes a vision of self-interest thesis by looking at the demand side, so to speak, and it shows behind the veil of his civility very little consideration for the taste of his fellow intellectuals for complex arguments, which seems to me quite a criticism. Here's a passage, Reason. Perhaps you can go back to your comment about intellectuals. Why do you think the thesis put forth by von Mises and Schoeck that envy motivates many contemporary intellectuals' opposition to the free market. Freeman? Well, I don't think we'll get very far by interpreting the intellectual's motivation. Their critical attitudes might be attributed to personal resentment and envy, but I would say that a more fruitful direction and a more fundamental one is that the intellectuals are people with something to sell. So the question becomes, what is there a better market for? I think a major reason why intellectuals tend to move towards collectivism is that the collectivist answer is a simple one. If there's something wrong, pass a law and do something about it. If there's something wrong, it's because of some no good bum, some devil, evil, and wicked. That's a very simple story to tell. You don't have to be very smart to write it. You don't have to be very smart to accept it. On the other hand, the individualistic or libertarian argument is a sophisticated and subtle one. If there's something wrong with society, if there's a real social evil, maybe we'll make better progress by letting people voluntarily try to eliminate the evil. Therefore, I think there is an advance, a tendency for intellectuals to be attracted to sell the collectivist idea. It's paradoxical. People might then say that you are attributing to the collectivist intellectual a better feeling for a market. Of course, but while there's a bigger market for Fords than there are for the American motor products, there is a market for the American motor products. In the same way, there's a bigger market for collectivist ideas than there is for individualist ideology. The thing that really baffles me is that the fraction of intellectuals who are collectivists is, I think, even larger than would be justified by the market. And this, I found this, when I read this yesterday, I found this very interesting. If you look at the colleges and you look at the degrees that they're putting out, and you look at some of the classes that folks can take or are forced to take in colleges and universities, in the real world, they do not translate into making a living, supporting yourself. The only place those type of degrees, like women's studies or gender studies, the only place you're going to make a living off of those are in colleges and universities. There's no place in the real world where you can take it to the marketplace and turn that into a living. At least not now, at least not yet. Maybe there will. Maybe someone will figure out how to monetize that in the future. I don't know. That's the genius of the free market. We don't know. But intellectuals, they're afraid of this. They're afraid to get in the marketplace of ideas, because if their ideas won't make, and money would be like the grading tool. So if they can't make a living, if they can't make a profit off their ideas in a marketplace, and I think that's what they're afraid of, then they have to use coercion and collectivism to advance their ideas and keep them popular. But if you actually put the colleges and universities in the actual free market, where these degrees were judged by how well they advance in a marketplace where they can better people's lives and you can make a profit off of it, they'd fall flat on their face. And this all sort of goes into the theme that I have today about social democracy and how we're being pushed towards. You know, all the what I titled the show today, the dangerous path towards social democracy. It's a real danger that we're facing today, and there's a lot of things in our country that are forcing us this way. But there's also a huge pushback that's going on right now. There's an intellectual awakening in individuals that they're finally deciding enough's enough. You've had your chance. You've tried your ideas. They don't work. They deteriorate and corrupt society. We have corrupt politicians because of it. We have individuals that want to live corrupt lives by asking politicians and other people to do their stealing for them in the form of taxation, and to control people through laws and regulations because they can't control people themselves. There's a whole lot of this going on, folks, throughout our country. And it's not good. It's not good. As a matter of fact, if you want to get technical about it, since I'm a Christian also, this is something that God doesn't even do. God can't force me to be a Christian. God can't force you to be a Christian. God can't force you to read and understand and abide by His word and His will. And He won't do it. He wants us to come to Him free, of our own free will, of our own understanding. That's how God puts it. He's not going to force us. And again, you got to remember that social democrats, government is God to them, little g God. And so they use that to try to control folks because they can't do it themselves. And again, this is some place that God doesn't even go to. Last story of the day. This is a big one. This is from the National Review by David French, posted on April 17th of this month here. California gender bill, another attack on religious freedom. I think I can get through this last one here. I've been hydrating with water and everything today, and it's just for some reason it's a dry day. Talk of political compromise is meaningless when one side seeks your silence. On Sunday evening, New York Magazine's Jonathan Chait published a piece asking why more disgruntled Republicans don't punish their party by switching sides. Chait, I think that's how you pronounce it, Chait, notes that the strongest defense against the election of an extreme or unfit leader is for his more mainstream partners to defect en masse. Yet with few exceptions, never Trump Republicans, especially never Trump social conservatives, were steadfastly never Hillary and remain, as Chait calls it, never Democrats. Why? I'd suggest the answer lies in the words extreme and mainstream. Chait's premise implies that Republicans have gone extreme, yet more sensible conservatives are strangely refusing to join a mainstream opposition. Yet that's not how the world looks from the right side of the aisle. From there, it looks as if the Democrat Party is responding to Trump by galloping away from the center, doubling down on the very policies and ideologies that led evangelicals to vote en masse for Trump as a form of simple self-defense. It's interesting, for example, that Chait makes the argument just as the California State Assembly is set to vote on a bill that would actually, among other things, ban the sale of books expressing Orthodox Christian beliefs about sexual morality. Yes, ban the sale of books. Assembly Bill 2943 would make it an unlawful business practice to engage in a transaction intended to result or that results in the sale or lease of goods or services to any consumer that advertise offers to engage in or to engage in sexual orientation change efforts with an individual. The bill then defines sexual orientation change efforts as any practices that seek to change an individual's sexual orientation. This includes efforts to change behaviors for gender expressions or to eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attractions or feelings towards individuals of the same sex. This is extraordinarily radical. Christian orthodoxy is simple. Regardless of a person's desire, their orientation, the standard of right conduct is crystal clear. Sex is reserved for marriage between a man and a woman. When it comes to gender expression, there's no difference between sex and gender, and the Christian response to gender dysphoria is compassion and treatment, not indulgence in surgical mutilation. Put another way, there is a fundamental difference between temptation and sin. California law would intrude directly on this teaching by prohibiting even the argument that regardless of sexual desire or a person's sexual behavior should conform to biblical standards. Christians find their identity in Christ, not in their gender, not in their sexual orientation. The state of California says no. Your gender and your orientation are your identity, and you should engage in actions that celebrate and ratify your alleged essence. The state is creating a new religion of sexual liberalism, or libertinism, declaring the religions opposing it aren't just false but harmful, and then prohibiting contrary religious exercise. No doubt that Christian orthodoxy is contentious. No one doubts that its teachings on sexual morality are increasingly unpopular, but they remain constitutionally protected, and no state legislature should be permitted to ban a good, such as a book or a service like counseling, that makes these arguments and provides them to willing, consenting consumers. In fact, state law should lock in a sexual revolution or orthodoxy that all too often hurts the very people the state seeks to protect. When disgruntled conservatives survey the national landscape, they see a president who's engaged in appalling behavior and a resistance that's sprinting away from them as fast as it can. To take just one example, large numbers of children who exhibit gender dysphoria eventually desist. Their dysphoria resolves itself as they grow older. Indeed, there are serious research indicating that this is the most likely outcome. For a child with gender dysphoria, under AB 2943, the act of communicating this truthful and indeed hopeful message could very well lead to legal jeopardy. This is extraordinary. Despite the obvious constitutional problems and despite its obvious intolerance for the Christian ethics of millions of its citizens, the bill is presently sailing through, passing two committees' votes by 8-2 and 8-1 margins. It may come up for an assembly vote as soon as this Thursday. And of course, California is no marginal state. It's hailed as the center of opposition to Trump and called the future of American politics. It's the progressive model, not the progressive fringe. And that brings me back to Shayette. When disgruntled conservatives survey the national landscape, they see a president who's engaged in appalling behavior and a resistance to it is sprinting away from them as fast as it can. Too many members of the resistance aren't willing to compromise sufficiently even to maintain the culture war status quo. There should be more tax funding of abortion, less religious freedom, and less free speech, they say. Now in the beating heart of progressive America, not even the books are safe. When Shayette asked why aren't more never-Trumpers willing to support the opposing party, many answer via Twitter was simple: because all too many progressives hate social conservatives and won't compromise 1 inch to bring any of this to fold, or bring any into the fold. But it's worse than a failure to compromise. When it comes to social conservatives, the radical left's fundamental goal is to defeat and dominate. How do you ally with the movement that demands your silence? And there's some good links on there. Free speech on campus can't be saved. It's a video on there you can go look at. And again, this is where we're going to sort of end the show on this, folks. It is amazing to me. It is totally amazing to me how California is going down the wrong path. That they're actually trying to go against Americans' natural rights of freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of speech, which means we can read any books we want to read. The government should be about banning books. That is, I hate to keep bringing up 1930s Germany, but that's exactly what Germany was doing. They were banning books. The government was banning books they did not want people to read. I had a friend of mine on Facebook. He showed a picture of, he has a copy of, I can't remember if it was George Orwell's 1984 or if it was Fahrenheit 451. That he was moving from the fiction to the nonfiction side of his library. It would work with either book, folks. It would. That's where we're getting to. And if you want to look to see where progressives really want to take our country, you look no further than California. No further than California, folks. And that, to me, what California is doing is a real problem. Because what they're doing goes against our First Amendment rights, or protected rights. Now remember, rights aren't granted to us by government. We had them before government was formed. We have freedom of religion. We have freedom of speech. We have freedom of association. We have right to redress grievances of our government. Matter of fact, I'll get it out here. Always have my little printed out Constitution here. First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now this bill out in California would violate the first clause. Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now the Bill of Rights here are a restriction on the federal government, but they're stating rights that we have that no government, federal, state, or local, has the right to violate. Remember, this is the state. These are the states getting together to create the federal government, folks. The abridging of free speech or of the press. Books, that's part of the press. Free speech. What we read in books, how we formulate our ideas, how we put them out to the public, like I am here on YouTube. This is a dangerous bill, and if it passes California, it will not. I know it doesn't pass constitutional muster. And I think there's groups out there that will be ready to challenge this and hopefully maybe get it expedited right up to the Supreme Court. And this is something that's very, very important. This is something that deals with one of our fundamental rights, freedom of religion, and the free exercise thereof. And California is doing, again, I can't emphasize this enough, secular Democrats think government is God. That most social Democrats don't believe in God. They don't believe in the existence of God. They're either Gnostic or they're atheist in their beliefs. And it's no more complicated than that. And for a state to be contemplating this, it's just like Canada, and this is where the whole Jordan Peterson controversy came from. Instead of treating gender dysphoria, Canada's allowing it to flourish without treatment and then making it a criminal act if you don't use somebody's preferred gender. And as a Christian, I only recognize two, male and female. That's it. I only recognize as a Christian marriage between a man and a woman. That's it. I believe the LGBTQ community is a choice. If it wasn't a choice and it was something natural, wouldn't you think that the percentage of the American population would be more than 3 to 4%, and that's being generous, of the population identify as LGBTQ? And whatever other numbers you want to put underneath there? If it was natural, if it was something that we were born with, wouldn't you think the percentages would be higher? I asked that question. Gender dysphoria is a mental condition. And what we're doing, what social democrats are doing in our society today by pushing this stuff on elementary students is criminal. It is criminal. These people need to be sued, and they need to be taken before the bar of justice. And if it isn't criminal, at least we should be able to sue them out of existence as far as financially and everything, so they don't have a financial foothold to do this nonsense. And so again, all you got to do is look at California and see that California does not have the country's best interest at heart. They really don't. And so if we look at California, if we keep going the way we're going, the whole country's going to look like California, and God help us then. God help us then. Well, folks, you hear the music. That's the end of the show. Fear not, I'll be in another video. I'll be putting out a couple more videos this afternoon. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. And folks, if you like what you hear on this, please subscribe and hit the notification button next to it so you get notified every time I put a video out. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Leave your comments of why you've given me either a thumbs up or thumbs down. Please share the video with your friends and family. That's how I've grown to where I'm at today. And please, 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 if you can monetarily support me, I would appreciate it. I have a Patreon page set up, and I also have a PayPal, which I thought the PayPal link was in my show notes page and in my YouTube descriptions. It hasn't been, but that's been corrected. It's there. If you want to donate by PayPal, by all means do so. Folks, have a great rest of the day. God bless, and we'll see you on the next video. Remember, on Sunday, attend the church of God's choice, not your choice, and we'll see you in the next video.